Well, hello. So glad we get to continue our discussion of the miracles of Jesus, continue to get to see how his ministry is expanding, how he is involving the disciples more in showing them really what their role is going to be in the ministry. We got a chance to look yesterday at the miracle of Jesus walking on the water and how Jesus was using that to demonstrate not only his own deity, but also really is the second part of that story of the feeding of the 5,000, demonstrating, really testing the disciples' faith. And right now, the disciples aren't passing that test. They don't have the faith that they need in Jesus. Their hearts are hard, and they continue to not truly believe in who Jesus is, but they're growing. They're continuing to advance in their understanding. The next miracle we're going to look at, we've been looking at how Luke kind of takes a little bit of a pause in between here, and Mark and Matthew really kind of fill in the gap here. John continues to go do his own thing in his own gospel. But Matthew and Mark are going to kind of expand this section a little bit and really explore the dynamic between Jesus and the disciples. And so we see at the conclusion of them crossing the sea together, they go into the region of Gennesaret. And so this is another Gentile-heavy region. This is, again, right near the Sea of Galilee. And so you would have cities in this area that would be predominantly Gentile. A lot of the countryside would be predominantly Jewish. And so they then have a discussion with the Pharisees. And Jesus is, again, challenged by the Pharisees, now not just from the area, but now you have Pharisees and scribes coming up from Jerusalem. And we've seen Jesus has gone to Jerusalem several times in the Gospel of John. He's already made himself aware to the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees there. He's overturned the temple once. And so we know that they are aware of Jesus. And so now it seems as if they are becoming more alarmed by Jesus, because now they're coming up to Galilee to where Jesus is to challenge him and to test him. And so they're going to talk to him about tradition and why his disciples don't follow the traditions of washing their hands and of cleansing and all these things. And Jesus really rebukes and challenges them right back. Why do you uphold these traditions over the actual Torah? And he uses the example of honoring your father and mother, and how the Pharisees would say, well, you don't need to do that if you've dedicated the money you would have used and you've dedicated it to the temple. And so Jesus challenges them and really utters this really impressive statement in verse 10 of Matthew 15, where he says, "Hear and understand, it is not what enters into the mouth that defiles the man, but what proceeds out of the mouth, this defiles the man." And so it's a parable, but it's a very, very brief one. And the disciples ask for clarification. They ask, okay, what do you mean by this? And Jesus, kind of exasperatedly, in Mark in particular, but Matthew as well, he says, are you still lacking in understanding also? And again, it's kind of this running theme of Jesus being a little bit frustrated with the disciples of, you're still not getting this. You're still not understanding what I'm talking to. I'm not talking about physical things. I'm talking about the spiritual things. And he further explains that these inward things, greed and corruption that comes out of the heart, that's what corrupts a man, not what goes into him physically. And so again, he's trying to correct and mold these disciples into the type of leaders that are going to be able to look beyond the physical trappings of the Pharisees and the scribes and see the deeper spiritual truths. That's going to be illustrated in this next miracle that we look at, which is Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman. And so Jesus, kind of after this discussion in Gennesaret, he's going to withdraw. And we see Jesus do this a couple of times, particularly after controversy. He kind of withdraws. It's almost kind of like he kind of leaves the public light a little bit. And in particular, he goes to focus on healing. He goes and focuses on his compassion, almost kind of what seems to be his pet project almost, of going and helping people and healing them. And so here he actually withdraws out of Galilee completely and goes into the district of Tyre and Sidon. And so the district of Tyre is a very Gentile-heavy region. It's actually a Phoenician region area. And so that's where you get this idea of the Syrophoenician. Phoenicia is kind of the region, and then Syria is kind of the broader area. And so this is a very Gentile-heavy city. And in fact, the Tyrians had long been enemies of the Jews. They were some of the worst Gentiles in a lot of the minds of the Jewish people. Tyre was kind of renowned as a city of crass immorality, of paganism, and of economic corruption. And in particularly, they kind of economically dominated the region of Galilee. So there's a lot of tension between Galilee in particular and the region of Tyre. And so Jesus appears to use this incident again as instruction to the disciples. Notice what he says in chapter 15, verse 21. It says, Jesus went away from there, withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon, and a Canaanite woman from that region came out and began to cry out, saying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed." But he did not answer her a word. His disciples came and implored him, saying, "Send her away, because she keeps shouting at us." But he answered and said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered and said, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she said, "Yes, Lord. Even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "O woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you wished." This is a really powerful story that's going on here, and it's really closely connected to the episode where we see Jesus heal the servant of the centurion in Capernaum. And in particular, those are two major healings of Gentiles. And again, that's a really big deal because particularly in the Gospel of Matthew, as has been emphasized in the statement, Jesus' mission is to the Jews, is to the Jewish people. That's what he's come to do. He's been only loosely affiliated with the Gentiles. Now, we've seen in the Gospel of Mark, we saw him go and essentially create a disciple to the Gentiles when he heals the demon-possessed man and doesn't let him come with him, instead sends him to, hey, you go tell the good news that you've heard. You go tell the good things that have happened to you. So we've seen kind of loose connections to the Gentiles, but by and large, Jesus has been pretty limited in his ministry to the Jews. But even with that, Jesus seems really harsh here. And I think a lot of times when we go through this, we try to kind of blunt that. But I think that's part of the point of what's going on here, is that Jesus is saying things that are kind of hard. And we talked about this in the Centurions episode, that a lot of times our translations will say that Jesus is like, okay, I will go and heal your servant. And really what the original Greek is he's asking, shall I go heal your servant? I, a Jewish faith healer, go heal you, your a Roman centurion, your servant. And it's kind of the same thing here. When Jesus first reacts, he doesn't say anything to her. In fact, the only reason he responds in Matthew's gospel is because his disciples finally say, like, hey, she keeps yelling. Can you tell her to go away? And he doesn't respond to her still. He actually responds to the disciples and makes that comment, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So the fact that he's responding to the disciples shows in Matthew's gospel he's intending the disciples to understand what's going on here. He's telling the disciples, you know what my mission is. I'm only going to the lost sheep of Israel. But then she comes and she bows down before him. And notice how much this Syrophoenician, Canaanite, Gentile woman, you have as many negative attributes about her as you could. She's called him Lord. She's called him the Son of David. She knows a lot about Jesus. This is not just some random person kind of hoping on a whim. She knows a lot about Jesus. She knows he's Lord. She knows he's the Son of David. And so she asks again, Lord, help me. And he answered and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Which sounds like a really insulting statement, and it kind of is. And it would really characterize the Israelite opinion of the Gentiles. They were dogs. They were less than people. They were subhuman. They were not God's chosen people. And so Jesus, kind of using an idiom of that people, is kind of basically challenging this Gentile woman, like, hey, you know what Jews are about. You know that, we don't participate with you. Am I supposed to take what I've come to give to the Jewish people? Am I supposed to give it to you as well? And her response is really fascinating because it says, yes, Lord. And if you have most American translations, it says, yes, Lord, but even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Which that but there, which you'll notice in your footnotes, in the Greek, that but, that contrast is not there. And so it makes it seem like the Gentile woman's essentially agreeing with Jesus, like, yes, I know we're not supposed to get it, but maybe you can give me a little bit of help. She's actually kind of disagreeing with what Jesus says. Her yes is actually a response that, yes, it is good for the dogs to receive the crumbs. Because it is good for the dogs to receive the bread, because even in your households, the dogs receive the crumbs. And so in other words, she's kind of recognizing the point that, yes, the Jews do have primacy in your mission, but yes, we have a part in this as well. We are still a part of this creation. And it's actually a very fascinating response, and it does show an enormous level of faith for a Gentile woman to recognize the complexities of what's going on here. And again, we're reminded, just like the centurion in Capernaum, who displays an inordinate amount of knowledge of who Jesus is, who understands the authority that's bestowed upon him, so too, this Syrophoenician woman understands the more global nature of Jesus' mission. Now, don't take that conclusion too far. Again, I don't think that this woman has a full understanding of everything, but she has faith that Jesus is more than just about Jews. He's about all peoples as well, even if he has come first to the Jewish people. And you see that he responds, "Oh woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you wish." And I think this is being very pointedly shown to us, particularly because it relates to the disciples. That they're being shown, hey, what's often said is that this is all about Jews. I've come, I'm the Messiah, I'm here for the Jewish people, and yet you're about to witness me do something that would run contrary to that. I'm about to work with a Gentile woman. And in fact, what we're about to see is that Mark's account is going to have Jesus continue to be in Tyre and Sidon. He's going to continue to work in this Gentile environment. And so what he is showing to the disciples is that, yes, right now the ministry is primarily about the Jews, but it's about to be much bigger. And again, if we think about what we've read about in the minor prophets in particular, that was always the intent, is that all the nations were going to be gathered to Jerusalem. And so they were going to be gathered, into this covenant relationship with Israel, but it was always going to be about more than just that one racial group. And so what we're seeing is Jesus is, I think, kind of deconstructing what the disciples are preconceiving about this. And he's really showing them that you in particular, you're going to have more to do than just your people. The whole world is going to be your mission field. And so Mark in particular is going to continue to build that as he continues this discussion in Tyre and Sidon. But all of this is part of this continual growth of the disciples and continuing to educate them on what their role is going to be as Jesus' ministry comes to a close and their extension of Jesus' ministry begins. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. We're so appreciative of the continued support, the continued enthusiasm for this material. We pray that it's been edifying, that it's been helpful to consider these things, to study these miracles, again, a little bit maybe of a deeper context than we've done before. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. We love you guys. We miss you. We cannot wait to hopefully see most of you guys on Sunday, and again, continue to hopefully claw our way back into a little bit more sense of normalcy. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.